Welcome to episode 80 of the Eat for Endurance podcast. My name is Claire Schornstein, and I am a board-certified sports dietitian and runner based in Santa Cruz, California. I provide virtual nutrition coaching and other services to athletes of all abilities, and I host this podcast to demonstrate that there is no one-size-fits-all nutrition approach for health and for performance. So first, I just want to wish everyone a very happy holidays. We just wrapped up Hanukkah over here yesterday, and we'll be only a few days away from Christmas when this episode comes out next week. So I hope you are all able to take some time for yourself to celebrate, whether that's with loved ones or out in nature or whatever makes you happy, and of course, with plenty of good food. All right, so today is a solo episode, and we're doing something a little bit different. As you may have heard in my previous episodes, I've been working on a new self-paced course called Peak Performance for Endurance Athletes, and I thought it would be fun to give you all a free sneak peek and record Module 1 for you all so you can see what I've been working on, other than one-to-one client work and podcasting, of course. And just as an FYI, there are 7 modules in total for this course. So you get 1/7 of the course for free. And the course itself will include detailed slides with lots of visuals and a video of me speaking. So keep that in mind when you listen to the audio today. I had actually hoped to have the course finished by now so I could release it in early January. But, life and kids have other plans and gotten in the way, and I'm sure my fellow parents of young kids can sympathize, and I'm actually fighting a tail end of a cold right now. It's just been so much sickness, especially in the last couple of months. So please excuse my congestion today. I'm sounding a little funny. When I do the course, I obviously will not be sick and sound like this. So I have a few more modules to do, and then I have to record the whole thing. But I'll have lots of great content. Lots of it's done, and I can't wait to release it. My goal is the end of January right now, so stay tuned if you're interested. Before I present Module 1 to you, though, I just want to shout out a couple things. First, this is actually my 25th episode of 2023. And I've had this podcast for a long time, since 2019. It's only episode 80. So you can see that I have really not been very consistent over these years, the last 4 years, I guess. It'll technically be, it's been over 4 years now. So this past year has really been the first time I've ever been consistent in putting out episodes every other week. And I'm really proud of that. So just wanted to shout that out, and it's really great. It's working well, and I'm trying to keep that up. So I hope you guys have been enjoying the content. When I look back at, the episode directory, I've been really stoked to see the guests that have been on, especially this past year. Second, I am finally starting a monthly newsletter. I already sent the first one out this past month. It's free. I include nutrition tips, recipes, podcast highlights in case you miss an episode, special discounts, client wins, links to recent blog posts, because I did also start a blog on my website finally. Yay. And much more, nutrition Q&A, all kinds of stuff. So if you'd like to sign up, head on over to my website, eatforendurance.com. Enter your email, and you'll get my free 3-page winter fueling guide to download as soon as you confirm your subscription as a nice little bonus. And lastly, I still have some trucker hats available, so support the show and help me get them out of my house. Head on over to my website shop page to get yours today. They're really awesome hats, I promise. I'm staring at 2 boxes of them right now in my little podcasting closet. And of course, you'll get free shipping and a free sticker thrown in, all for $40. All right, who is ready for Module 1 of my upcoming course? Let's do this. Welcome to Peak Performance for Endurance Athletes, your ultimate guide to strategic fueling. I've been meaning to put this course out for years as a summary of nearly a decade of working one-to-one with nutrition clients, and I'm so excited to finally share my evidence-based knowledge and expertise with a greater audience. I assume if you're taking this course, you already know me, so I'll keep my intro short. I'm a board-certified sports dietitian, that's that CSSD after my name, and a trail and ultra runner. I am passionate about helping active individuals like yourself feel and perform their best, so I am so glad that you are joining me today. This course has 7 modules of content, all of which will help you learn how to develop your own fueling and hydration plan, and if you happen to be training for an event, get you ready for race day. Today in Module 1, we're setting the stage. We will discuss why performance nutrition is so important. We'll chat about exercise and fuel use. We'll compare fueled versus fasted training, and then we'll quickly cover everyday nutrition. Everyday nutrition is a massive, massive topic, and it's outside the scope of this course to go deep into it, but it's also the foundation of performance nutrition. So I really wanted to introduce a handful of key concepts in today's module. We will also revisit some of these later on when discussing recovery nutrition. Module 2 covers all things hydration. This is a really big one and we go super in depth. Module 3 is fueling before and during exercise, another big topic of course. Then in Module 4, we move to recovery nutrition. So that's everything that you need to be focusing on after exercise. Module 5 covers training the gut and troubleshooting common fueling issues. In Module 6, we address supplements with a focus on performance supplements, but we do also cover several vitamins and minerals. And we conclude the program with Module 7, Race Week, which means we'll get into everything you need to know about carb loading, eating the night before and morning of an endurance event, and we'll of course go over some example race day fueling plans in different sports scenarios. Each module varies in length, it's very heavy on education as you'll see, and includes some homework assignments and downloads at the end to practice what you learned and get the most out of this course. Because of this, I do encourage you to space out the modules slightly so you have some time to do the assignments and also to fully digest the content. But of course, this program is yours and you get to decide when and where you want to watch and learn. All right, so with that all out of the way, let's set the stage with Module 1. I want to start with the most obvious question. When we say performance nutrition, what exactly are we referring to? Performance nutrition is how you fuel and hydrate your body before, during, and after exercise. So this includes your meals and snacks before and after, and any products or foods you consume during physical activity. Performance nutrition also encompasses any supplements that you take to enhance sports performance. This will be the focus of this course. And even though it's not on the slide here, I'd also like to take a moment to define endurance athlete because people often assume that you have to be exercising for hours upon hours to be an endurance athlete. But really, to benefit from everything that we're covering in this course, you just need to be regularly training greater than 90 minutes. That's really when our body starts to need outside sources of fuel and hydration, but more on that later, of course. Let's take a look at an average endurance athlete to understand why performance nutrition is so important. So during physical activity, endurance athletes are expending tons of energy, 500 to 800 or more calories per hour. They're burning through tons of carbs as well, maybe 150 grams or even more per hour. They're also burning through fat. They're losing anywhere from half a liter to 2.5 liters of fluid an hour, while also losing an average of 950 milligrams of sodium per liter, all of which must be replaced. So that is just outlining why it's so important to have a solid individualized nutrition plan in place to account for all these increased demands on your body to help you reach your performance goals and not feel like absolute garbage outside of training. I'm a big fan of making sure my athletes understand the why behind fueling. So let's learn some metabolism basics. At any given time, we are burning a mixture of fat and carbohydrates for energy, and only a very small amount of protein should be used for energy. Glucose, aka sugar, is stored as glycogen in our muscles and in our liver, which provides the fuel that we need when we exercise, especially at higher intensities. We do have limited storage capacity, so our goal is to prolong these fuel stores through a combo of training and through nutrition. We are typically depleting our stores with moderate to high intensity exercise longer than 90 minutes, and that means we really need to take nutrition on board during these longer sessions to keep exercise going. Now, fat stores, by contrast, are relatively unlimited, and even on the leanest of lean athletes, but fat provides less efficient energy compared to carbs, and it is limited by oxygen that is available. So at rest and lower intensity exercise, we are burning more fat, and during moderate to higher intensity exercise, we are burning relatively more carbs. Now, the good news is that training makes us better fat burners. Trained athletes can keep going for longer periods at higher intensities than untrained people can, and are able to become more efficient at burning fat as fuel, which spares their glycogen stores. We can also affect this through dietary changes. This does not mean that we can mostly rely on our fat for fuel. It's well established through decades of research that high carb availability improves exercise performance. But in the last decade or so, and I'm sure you've all heard this, especially in the context of the low carb, high fat eating style that has become so very popular within our endurance community, There's been research looking into whether we can train with fewer carbs around to see if we can spare our muscle glycogen and increase fat oxidation or fat burning to improve performance. This concept is known as training, quote unquote, low, with low referring to carbs. Now, in my practice, I often see my athletes doing a fasted morning session because they're in a rush and they don't make time to eat, or maybe they have trouble with GI tolerance, especially in the early morning. But some endurance athletes fast intentionally for a supposed performance benefit, and that's why I want to take a look at the research behind it. So it's true that some training adaptations do happen, such as increased fat breakdown for energy, but there really isn't enough evidence to suggest that there is a direct performance enhancement. More importantly, there are lots of negative things that can happen. Training without enough carbs available will reduce your training intensity for that session, and if it's done too often, you lose muscle mass and you compromise your immune system. That's definitely it's not things that you want to happen. Your body also becomes less efficient at oxidizing carbs, which impacts your performance on race day when you are taking in more carbohydrates. So, chronically training fasted and specifically training low carb has consequences, and it's something I do not recommend to my clients based on the current evidence available. Instead, I recommend training high. And not that kind of high, although I'm sure that's a thing. I mean, taking in an appropriate amount of carbohydrates prior to exercise to optimize performance. We will discuss this in great detail in Module 3. Now, if you're curious to try this out, to try out a fasted workout, you certainly can do so. It's your body. You can do what you want. Be sure to please choose a lower intensity and short to moderate duration session where performance is not crucial and you're not trying to work on power and speed. And then make sure to fuel adequately afterwards with carbs and protein, which we will discuss more in Module 4. So based on the current research available, at least, carbs are still king when it comes to performance. We need them before, we need them during and after exercise, and we need them consistently across the day in our meals and snacks, along with protein and other nutrients. Sadly, the carb phobia is still going strong in the general population as well as in the athletic world, and I see this every freaking day in my practice. One version of this is a fear of sugar, and the other is and other simple carbs. I've had clients scared to take gels. They feel uneasy when I suggest things like white bread or other, simple to digest carbs. And I will say this usually stems from this whole quote-unquote good versus quote bad carb mentality, which I really encourage my clients to let go of and to instead approach food as neutral. This goes for all foods, not just carbs. It's much easier said than done, of course, and how to work on this and just approaching food and body image and all of that. That's outside of the scope of this course, but it is really, really important. My point is that there's a reason why sports products are made the way that they are. They're typically high carb. They're very easy to digest. They have easy to digest sugars, and that maximizes absorption. They're also typically low fat, low fiber, and low protein, and that's because we mostly need carbs, and we want these carbs to empty quickly from the gut. Protein, fiber, and fat sit longer in the stomach and can lead to more GI issues, especially in running sports. So while we embrace more nutrient-dense carbs like our starchy veggies and beans and whole grains and all that jazz, that's not really what we're going for during exercise, obviously. Please save that for your meals and snacks at other times of day. There's a reason why you don't see kale handed out at aid stations, right? So there really is a place for all foods to fit into an athlete's diet, and we really want to embrace all of them. Along those lines, we really can't dive into performance nutrition without first emphasizing how important it is to pay attention to what you eat each and every day. Endurance exercise increases our total energy and nutrient needs, and if you do not make changes to your everyday nutrition and you only work on the performance nutrition piece, you will not have a great training cycle or race day. You also just won't feel great in other parts of your life, and no one wants to feel like a zombie for the rest of the day after a long or hard workout when you have to go to work or take care of your family or whatever else is going on in your life. Inadequate daily nutrition opens you up to injury, fatigue, illness, nutrient deficiencies, and more. No one has time for that. So let's try to not make that happen. So as part of this first module, I want to go over some key concepts relating to everyday eating for endurance athletes. So number one, athletes need to consume more energy. Endurance exercise dramatically increases energy needs, and meeting these higher caloric needs is the top priority when it comes to preventing injury and other health issues and reaching your performance goals. It's really easy, and I see this all the time. It's really easy to hyper focus on things like, oh, my iron's low, or I have to get a ton of protein, or hey, let's talk about that latest, the latest performance supplement that everyone's talking about. But the thing is, you can do whatever you want in all these different areas if you are not consistently eating enough. And I'm not just talking about day to day, I'm talking even within the day. That can cause really big issues. Underfueling, and it can be intentional or unintentional. This is the most common thing I see in my practice, and it's one of the main things I work on with a lot of my endurance people. So if you find yourself struggling right now with energy levels, performance, recovery, or injury, or even if you're feeling okay and you're just wondering what you can do to improve, I really want you to ask yourself some of these questions as a starting point. So I'm just going to list some of these, and they're on the slide as well. Are you eating consistently? And that means every 3 to 4 hours or so. Or are you skipping meals or snacks? Do you eat only when hungry? Or do you recognize that as athletes, we can't always rely on hunger as a signal to eat? Do you eat the same every day, or do you change the way that you eat on different training days? Are you trying to lose weight while in a training cycle, which puts you at risk of low energy availability? Are you eating carbs at all meals and snacks, and are you eating enough of them? Same question for protein. Have you gotten blood work done? And have you noticed that any of your lab values are not normal? I want you to think about these questions and answer them honestly. Some answers, maybe, I don't know. And that's okay too. And because it's January right now, and I thought I'd just throw this in here as a reminder of what's going to happen if you start cutting carbs, demonizing sugar, and trying to lose weight while training for an endurance event. Spoiler alert, it's not going to be pretty. And P.S. for the podcast listeners, this is a meme of a dumpster on fire in a river floating down. So not going to be a pretty picture if you cut all these things out. In all seriousness, underfueling can eventually lead to what is known as relative energy deficiency in sport. And that's another concept I want to briefly introduce in this course. REDS, as it's known, it describes the wide range of negative symptoms and health outcomes that can result from chronic low energy availability, because the body just doesn't have what it needs to function after taking into account the cost of exercise. As a result, it preserves and redirects energy to essential functions. It's worth noting 2 things here in this context. First, when you're at rest, doing literally nothing, like you're just sitting on the couch chilling, the body still requires a lot of energy to simply exist. People seem to forget this. They seem to forget that their body works hard to keep them alive. We really take it for granted. And then we add endurance exercise to this, plus other daily movement and the energy used to digest. That really skyrockets your energy needs. People have this idea that if they're not out, on the trails or swimming or biking or doing whatever that you're doing for, hours upon hours, that they just don't need to eat very much. And of course, exercise changes how much you need. But you still need to remember your body is burning a ton of energy just to keep you alive, okay? Second, underfueling can be both unintentional and intentional. Your body does not care which, okay? Weight also does not necessarily indicate whether or not you are feeling well. But there are some warning signs, and these can serve as some red flags. So I'm just going to read through a few of these. They're also on the slide. Frequent stress fractures, menstrual dysfunction in women, or low testosterone and low sex drive in men, low iron and other nutrient deficiencies, GI issues, trouble sleeping, reduced performance and recovery, mood disturbances, and there's a lot more. There's a ton of amazing research on REDS, and this in itself deserves its own full program, and they're out there, believe me. But again, we're just introducing some topics today before we dive into performance nutrition strategies. So for REDS, at least, I'm going to stop there. All right, so along with meeting increased energy demands, we also need to get more carbs in, because as endurance athletes, we burn through more carbs. The higher your training volume, the more carbs you need. The guidelines you see here in this chart, they're based on activity level and body weight, and you can see how your needs shift, they increase, based on how many hours you're putting in. I usually start my athletes at around 5 grams of carbs per kilogram of body weight, and we go up from there based on training volume. Now, if we identify that an athlete is only consuming, for instance, like 3 grams a kilogram at baseline, we slowly work up to an appropriate level. But the takeaway from this slide is that endurance athletes need somewhere between 5 and 12 grams of carbs per kilogram of body weight, and most athletes are not consuming anywhere close to this, based on my experience and the experiences of many other sports IDs. Keep in mind that these calculations give you total daily requirements that should be spread out across the day in all meals and snacks, and any sports nutrition products that you consume do count towards these goals. All right, moving on to protein. That's another key nutrient to discuss because it really plays a key role in building and repairing muscle and other lean tissues, in enzyme function, growth and development, and immunity. Active people need more protein than sedentary people. And without adequate protein during training and without timing it correctly, injury and illness are way more likely to occur. And this is particularly important as we get into our 40s and above, since research has shown that we need even more protein as we age. So where do endurance athletes, what do they need? Well, endurance athletes should probably aim for somewhere between 1.4 to 1.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. And just again, to compare that to the sedentary person, healthy sedentary person needs roughly 1 gram per kilogram per day. Now, brand new research suggests, I think it came out in December or something, it does suggest that we may not need to consume protein across the day in more moderate amounts as we frequently thought. The general recommendation you often hear is, spread it more evenly in 4 to 5 doses of, say, 20 to 40 grams, something like that. But this research did show that we can consume it less frequently in much higher amounts. The research study that I'm thinking of in particular, it used 100 grams at a time. But the important consideration here is if you consume too much protein in one sitting, it just may not be practical. You may be crowding out other nutrients like carbs, so I really do still encourage my clients to spread it out fairly evenly across meals and snacks if that works for you. Now, there are cases where protein needs may be higher, for instance, above 2 grams per kilogram per day even. And that might be when training volume is really high or really intense, or maybe if someone is trying to preserve your lean body mass while total energies aren't being met 100%. That could be in a weight loss situation or a different kind of situation. So do keep that in mind. And we also, I have on the slide here, I didn't mention that we should be aiming for at least 0.5 grams per kilogram post-workout. We may need more than that at certain points, and especially if, for instance, you're in your 40s or higher. But we'll get into these details when we chat all about recovery nutrition. Now, since I covered protein and carbs, we can't neglect the last of the 3 macronutrients, fat, which kind of usually gets thrown last. Mostly because there isn't really a specific athlete recommendation for fat intake. It's about the same as it is for non-athletes, roughly 20 to 35% of total energy intake. But, because athletes need more calories, they usually need more fat to meet those calorie needs. Now, why is fat important? It's integral for hormone production, for nutrient absorption. That's why you're always hearing, make sure you have fat in your meal. It's really key to absorbing those fat-soluble vitamins, to reducing inflammation, namely omega-3s. It makes food taste good. That's super important, obviously, and it really keeps you full. So these are all really important things for everybody, and particularly for athletes. One thing to note, fat has over twice the amount of calories or energy per gram compared to carbs and proteins, so it's really helpful at meeting increased energy needs. We also can't make 2 fatty acids in particular, omega-3s and omega-6. It's called essential fatty acids because we can't make it in the body, and that just means we have to consume them in the diet. Omega-3 really is the one that most people don't get enough of through food. Not everyone consumes enough fatty fish, for instance. There are some plant-based sources, but it's just harder to get enough. And so it's really important for us to kind of evaluate how much you're getting in the diet, if you need a supplement or whatever else, because it does play an important role in fighting inflammation. Now, I don't really usually give specific recs for amounts when it comes to fat. I just really make sure that it's included. We talk about the different types of fats and specifically if they're, if the person's getting enough omega-3s, as I just mentioned. I'm working with athletes to make sure that they're not including too much fat in some circumstances because it can crowd out protein and carbs, and fat is, very filling. So that's fat in a nutshell. And lastly, we're going to breeze through a few micronutrients of concern in athletes, and those are iron, calcium, and vitamin D. Of course, this is not a comprehensive list. B12, magnesium, and others come into play as well, and it really depends on the individual's diet, what we're really looking at. And just know that we'll be revisiting some of these micronutrients and a bunch of others, including other supplements in the which module is supplements? I believe that's 5. But in the supplement module, we'll be going into detail on all of that great stuff. So let's kick things off with iron. It's found in a variety of animal and plant-based foods. It's often the micronutrient people think of when you're thinking of common nutrient deficiency in endurance athletes. You think, oh yeah, iron, that's such a big one. And it is very commonly low. The symptoms you often think of are fatigue and poor performance, poor recovery. Those are the ones that tend to come to mind. Low iron can happen, for instance, if you're just not eating enough. You don't have enough calories in the diet. You're not getting enough. It's not just low intake of iron, but low intake of all calories. But surely, if you're not consuming enough iron-rich foods, that's obviously can lead to low iron as well. It can also happen during periods of rapid growth, GI issues that lead to absorption problems, training at high altitudes, menstrual blood loss, foot strike hemolysis, blood donation, or injury. And just FYI, we do lose iron in sweat, urine, and feces. Now, treatment of iron deficiency anemia often isn't as easy as just taking a supplement and eating some iron-rich foods. If you do have chronic problems with iron, that's a really great reason to seek additional nutrition guidance from a sports dietitian so that you can figure out the root causes of your deficiency, because the answer is not just to supplement iron forever. That's just a band-aid. Supplementation really should be temporary. Again, we'll go into iron in detail in the supplement module, so sit tight there. Now, with calcium, we automatically think of bone health, right? But it really plays an important role in all kinds of other things, including muscle contraction, immune function, water balance, heartbeat regulation, and much more. So, we want to keep that in mind. Low calcium intakes are usually associated, again, if you're just not getting enough energy in. Again, that's that top priority, right? It's associated with disordered eating intake or low intake of calcium-rich foods like dairy, if you're restricting dairy. But really, we're taking a food-first approach here. There are plenty of food sources of calcium, even if you don't consume dairy. So dairy is a huge one, but non-dairy milks are fortified. Other dairy foods, of course, dark leafy greens, tofu, almonds, and more. So that really should be the focus. We always want to take that food-first approach. And for supplements, we really don't supplement here usually unless an athlete has a bone injury, low energy availability, or menstrual dysfunction. Those are kind of like the three situations we would supplement. And in that case, we usually tack on a vitamin D as well. So speaking of vitamin D, that's our third one here that we're going to address. It's a tricky one because it's harder to obtain from food, especially if you are vegan or vegetarian. And our primary source really is the sun. But the problem is, because we can make it in the skin, right? But the problem is there are a lot of different factors that reduce our ability to make it. And just a few examples, the time of the year, the time of the day, your skin tone, your age, there are just a bunch of things that can reduce how much we make. So there are many of us who are at suboptimal levels, and it's really important to get yourself checked. This is probably the most frequently supplemented vitamin that I see amongst my clients, and I frequently see suboptimal levels. Again, we're going to revisit this in great detail in the supplement module. Now, with all micronutrients, as I just mentioned, we really want to take a food-first approach. So as much as possible, eating a diet with a wide variety of foods, including those rich in all vitamins and minerals, and really only supplementing when there's clear evidence to do so. So for instance, when you have blood work proving that, we don't want to just willy-nilly throw supplements at ourselves and take them because, so-and-so influencer said so. So please do be careful with that. Now, supplements, they can be necessary in certain cases, but again, we want to know why. We don't want to just supplement and put that Band-Aid on there and that's the end of the story. We want to figure out what is the root cause, how can we fix it and stop it from happening so you're not forever supplementing, because that's not so fun, right? And please always speak to a professional before supplementing on your own, ideally from a dietitian or from a physician. Just make sure that your physician is aware that endurance athletes have different requirements than non-athletes, and that a ferritin of 19, for instance, is not normal and must be treated. I say this because I cannot tell you how many female clients I've gotten in my office who had their ferritins in the absolute garbage and were told that it was normal. It is not normal, guys, okay? So please do keep that in mind. All right, so let's put this all together now. I know I just threw out so much information, and I want to be able to give you guys some visuals and how to apply this to the everyday in a way that makes sense to you. So how much food is enough? Okay, your training doesn't remain static. Your food intake shouldn't either. There's an image here for those listening. The question of how much is enough is one I get all the time from clients, and especially from my endurance athletes. And everyone obviously has different energy and nutrient needs, and that depends on a number of factors, including body weight and daily energy expenditure, among other things. And we can absolutely calculate specific nutrient goals. And I often do this. I mean, I just gave you guys some equations, like the protein equation. Like you can calculate, specific macronutrient goals and other things. But the last thing I want for you guys is to be counting calories and macros, right? That sounds kind of miserable. Instead, we aim to learn basic principles that help guide us in building everyday meals and snacks. It's not to say that we're never calculating out, like, sure, we can do the gram per kilogram amount and break it down and kind of ballpark and whatever. But I'm talking about I'm thinking about this right now because I just had a client today who, and this is, I think, the third day in a row I've had a client who told me they worked with a macro coach. So this is not what I'm talking about. I don't want you having these 3 macro goals and you're counting every gram. That is not what I'm talking about here, okay? But yeah, so I'm getting sidetracked. Let me get back on here. So we're really trying to teach basic principles that can guide you, not let's count every single gram in every meal and snack. This is where something called performance plates are really handy, and this is really great, especially for my visual learners. I know sometimes people really need visuals. I've had some clients give me that feedback that, just reading a handout with a lot of words isn't really helpful. They really like to have those visuals. So the performance plates help get the point across that what's on our plate or in our bowl needs to change on different training days and during different phases of training. And it should go without saying, please don't use a tiny plate or a bowl, okay? That's really not the point of this. I mean, I know you can make it super balanced on a little tea saucer plate or whatever, but that's obviously not what we're going for, okay? All right, so we're going to get started with the quote-unquote easy day plate. And before I proceed, just for the benefit of my podcast listeners, so you can see these visuals, I actually have a blog post called How Much Do I Need to Eat? And it has all of these different athlete performance plates on them, so you can go and check it out if you want to pause this right now and pull up the blog post. It's the most recent one, and not only will you get the visuals, but all the details is going through, what I'm about to say right now. So that's going to be a really helpful thing for you guys to reference. All right, back to my little module here. Okay, so the easy day plate, this is for a rest day or a short, easy training session. So thinking a 30-minute or less cardio session, for instance. But it's in the context of a fairly low weekly training. So think up to 20 miles a week or 4 hours a week, something like that. All right. And this could also work well when, let's say, you're taking a break from exercise. Maybe you're injured or it's the off season. And a little asterisk there, because I've seen this all too often. The asterisk is as long as you aren't doing tons of other physical activity. I see this all the time in my practice. Athletes are, in the off season or they're injured and they're just doing a ton of cross training and they're not fueling adequately because in their mind, they're not truly training. They're not doing their sport, but in reality, they're really, really active. And I'm thinking of the number of runners I've gotten who, for instance, are just on the bike or elliptical or whatever it is. So please keep in mind that we have to fuel whatever activity that you're doing. Just because you're not doing your sport, that doesn't mean that you're not active, okay? So please keep that in mind. Now, as you can see in this visual, about 25% of the plate is carbs. So your whole grains, your pasta, your bread, your beans, starchy veggies, which in case anyone doesn't know, that's mostly your potatoes, your corn, your peas, that kind of stuff. That's in that bucket. Half the plate is fruits and veggies, and the asterisk on the veg is we're really mostly talking about non-starchy veggies. And this is really where you're getting your antioxidants, your fiber, your micronutrients. And in the case of fruit, you're getting some more carbs, of course. Now, the remaining 25% is lean protein, so your lean meats and poultry, your fish, your eggs, your dairy, tofu, etc. Right? Now, fish, of course, can be very fatty, but I'm still throwing that in there. I really don't want you to stress so much about the actual numbers, the percentages. The idea here is that we're trying to focus on what your plate or your bowl might look like, okay? Now, what's not shown in this pie chart, but if we, of course, have to include are your fats, so your nuts, your seeds, olive oils, fatty fish like salmon and tuna, avocado, nut butters, all that great stuff, and your hydration, so water, milk, 100% fruit juice, seltzer tea, coffee, moderate intake, of course, that kind of stuff, all right? The other thing I want to mention is I know that not everybody has their meals completely separated out like this. Maybe you're making a stew or a chili or whatever else and everything's combined. Just kind of ballpark, just get a sense of, okay, well, if I'm putting, say, the chili on rice, you can think about how much rice you're including relative to the meat in the chili or the beans. Just think about it in those terms. This isn't meant to be like super, super precise. It's really just a ballparking visual to kind of just guide you, okay? So don't stress too much about that. The moderate day plate is really good for longer training session days. So your 60-minute cardio sessions or 1 hour of strength, let's say, and also your higher levels of training. So this would be in that 20 to 40 miles a week range, or if you're running, or a 4 to 8 hour week, for instance. Now, you can also follow this on a rest day during higher volume training weeks. So let's say you're above 40 miles a week or above 8 hours. This is also appropriate. Okay, so we always have to think about context. I've said that before. Context is so incredibly important. For a moderate day plate, we keep protein the same. Protein's always staying the same, but we increase carbs to about, don't stress about the number, but it's 37.5% if you want to be exact. And we are decreasing fruits and veg to about that 37%. The real takeaway here, and what I want you to emphasize or want you to focus on, is that we need more carbs, and thus we need to eat slightly fewer fruits and veg, and primarily those fewer of those non-starchy veggies, as they're really not adding many carbs. Okay, so with more training, we need more carbs. This is really the message that we're sending here. Fats and hydration will vary depending on what your individual energy and hydration needs are. So, of course, we always need fat. We covered that already, why it's so important. We also just want to make sure we're not consuming so much that we're crowding out other nutrients like carbs. Okay, so we just want to keep that in mind. And then finally, the hard day plate, that's for really high intensity or long training days. So this could be speed work. This could be anything longer than 60 minutes. It could be a double workout day. Like let's say you do a swim and a bike, or let's say you do a run and a lift. And by the way, if your run is say only 30 or 45 minutes and your lift is another 45 minutes, we're talking total time here. It's not the individual workouts, but how long in total you're working out. So if your total time is over an hour, I want that really is counting on this hard day here. And of course, a competition day. So if you're running a race, this would be your hard day plate, okay? And this is also appropriate, by the way, to follow even for a shorter session or an easier training session during a heavy training period. So again, if, for instance, you're putting in over 40 miles a week or over 8 hours a week, which is very, very, very common among endurance athletes, this is where that hard day plate is really important, even if it's a quote-unquote easy session day, okay? So again, protein stays the same, but carbs increase to about half the plate, 50%, with fruit and veg dropping down to 25%. And once again, that emphasis is really on lowering those non-starchy veggies, which is everything except those potatoes, corn, and peas. So again, the takeaway here, and this is from all three of these plates, is that we need a lot more carbs and fewer of these low-carb, higher fiber veggies, and to an extent fruit, as our training volume and intensity increases while protein stays the same. All right, so we want to keep all that in mind. But what about snacks? Because we just talked about building these kind of adequate balanced meals as our training changes. So we do want to keep in mind that we also need roughly, say, 2 to 4 snacks per day to make sure we're eating consistently. And by consistently, I mean every, say, 3 to 4 hours. Sometimes people need a little bit more often, and it really depends, And the timing of snacks and how these, what these snacks look like, it really will depend on, are you fueling and recovering from workouts, or what your overall nutrition needs are? Obviously, you might need bigger meals and more snacks if you have really high nutrition needs. And I'm thinking about my Ironman athletes or my ultra runners and things like that. And timing will also depend on whatever your meal, workout, and general life schedule is. So this is where we always want to individualize this stuff. A snack can be absolutely anything. It can be leftovers. It can be a packaged food that we more typically think of as a quote-unquote snack food. It's whatever you want, whatever works for you. Obviously, what you choose will really depend on the situation. So, for instance, are you about to work out? Or did you just work out? Are you in the middle of a work day? What is the context? That's always the question we want to ask. Now, generally speaking, your snack should include carbohydrate, since we need more with greater amounts of exercise, and snacks are a really crucial way to get carbs in. Now, if it's right before workout, We want to go for those easier to digest, lower fiber carbs. If it's not, then we can include different types of carbs that may have a little bit more fiber and other nutrients. We'll, of course, go into more details on this in the later modules when we're covering fueling before workouts. You should also try to include protein, and especially if this isn't right before a workout, and definitely if it is after a workout, to help promote ongoing recovery and meet increased needs and to keep you full. And again, we're going to go into a little more of that in the module on recovery nutrition. And other than that, you can really include whatever else you want. Maybe it's fruit and veggies, which contribute more carbs and fiber and micronutrients, or fats from nuts or cheese, whatever works for you. And one last thing I want to mention before we wrap up this module. The goal really isn't to get away with as little fueling as possible. And I unfortunately have to say this because I just see it so often. I mean, just the other day I had a client who never really fueled for anything less than 13, 14 miles. And she took a gel, for the first time in a 10 miler, and that was a really big deal for her. But, I was kind of telling her, I was like, okay, well, that's a great first step, and we're going to continue working towards what an appropriate one. And she was kind of laughing because to her, it just seemed like so much. And this is why it's always so important, of course, to take people where they're at, right? But again, the goal isn't to get away with whatever, as little as possible. And as endurance athletes, we know that we can muscle through hard things. We know that if we had to do a hard workout fasted, we could push through. But that's not what we're trying to do. We're really trying to identify our individual targets, and we're trying to crush those because we want to feel our best, not only during training and racing, but also in everyday life. The last thing we want is to feel like absolute crap during or outside of our training sessions. And, keep in mind, most of us are recreational athletes with a ton of other responsibilities, and we do our sports for fun. So please remember that, because we want to make sure that we perform well in our daily lives too. This course isn't just about performance for our sports. It's about feeling awesome in the rest of our lives. All right, so I hope Module 1 helped to lay some really important groundwork for our deep dive into all things performance nutrition, and we're going to end with a little homework assignment. You certainly don't have to finish this assignment before moving on to the next module, but I really do recommend starting it as soon as you're able. So your assignment is to food journal for 3 to 5 days, and before you groan or roll your eyes, I swear this is not a calorie counting exercise. It's really more of a descriptive situation to help bring awareness to what you're doing, which is really important, especially when we're trying to identify where your baseline is right now and what you're doing in advance of all these modules that we're doing. Okay, so ideally it's including a mix of weekdays and at least one weekend day. And again, it's really just a great opportunity to promote self-awareness, for you to observe your current patterns and behaviors. And it will really be helpful as we discuss some of these other things like hydration and how to fuel before, during, and after exercise, and supplements, and all these different things we're talking about. We want to know what you're doing right now. And sometimes people are super aware of it, and sometimes people really aren't. And this is what I do with my own one-to-one clients after the first session. And we review the journal together. And it's really interesting, especially when we include like time of day and how it all plays out. Like, it's just really interesting what people realize about themselves in the process. So for instance, I want you to kind of explore, what are you currently doing to nourish yourself surrounding workouts? Are you eating consistently throughout the day? That's a really big one. A lot of people realize, ooh, gosh, I went like 7 hours between lunch and dinner. No wonder I'm starving, Pay attention to how you're composing your meals. Again, think back to those performance plates. So does every meal and snack have a protein and carb source? And are you including enough carbs? You can even calculate out, go back to that, those carb equations, kind of calculate out roughly where you think you fall, and do you think you're getting enough in? Again, I don't want you stressing about counting grams and all of that, but we can kind of spot check these things. Are you at bare minimum including a carb? Because all too often I see people, for instance, they're maybe including carbs at breakfast and lunch and some snacks, and then dinner, for whatever reason, it's just protein and veggies. I see that very often, okay? Do you regularly include fat in all your meals? Are you regularly eating plant foods? That's really important for overall health, right? And for recovery. Are you regularly consuming sources of omega-3 fatty acids, such as fatty fish, walnuts, flax, or chia seeds? And if not, do you take a supplement? That's a huge one. I see so many people really in a hole there. So again, please refer back to those performance plates if you need some visual assistance in building your meals and kind of understanding how you can improve that.
Now, everyday nutrition is such a massive, massive topic, so please don't feel like I'm expecting you to understand it all from this one short module. I really breezed through it today. But if you need further help in this area, I do plan to tackle this topic in a bit more detail in another course. I'm not sure when this is going to happen, but it will be a kind of companion course to this one, and it'll come out sometime later this year. But for now, just see if you can spot any areas to work on. I really wanted to at least provide the bare minimum education and support here so we can, just kind of identify some problem areas. And of course, you can always contact me if you feel like one-to-one coaching is something you would benefit of and you really need that higher level of support. As for where to journal, that's totally up to you. So many of my clients find it easy to track in the notes section of their phone. Others like making a Google Doc. You may prefer pen and paper. Currently, I just switched to a totally different client management system, so it's all like electronic in this special software now. So that's what my current clients are doing. But in the past, those were very popular things. And while you're journaling, I'd really love for you to just take a moment to assess the following. How are your energy levels? Are you recovering well after workouts? How are you performing during workouts? How are you sleeping? Have you recently gotten blood work done to check for any nutritional deficiencies? For females, are you regularly getting periods? For males, how's your sex drive and have you tested your testosterone? Are you suffering from any GI issues, and that could be every day or during workouts? There are a lot of things to dig into here, and that's just the surface of it, right? But asking yourself some key questions is a really great first step to identifying problem areas. And then you can begin taking steps towards correcting them. And again, you can also just reach out for professional assistance if you feel like you can't do it on your own. Now, you'll be able to download a PDF with food journal instructions and Teachable with an example log, as well as a list of all these questions that I just asked and that were in the slides. I hope Module 1 was helpful, and I'll see you all in Module 2 for a deep dive into hydration. Have a good one, guys.
All right, and that's our episode for today. If you happen to still be listening, hopefully I didn't lose all of you with this one. I know these solo episodes aren't for everybody. If you want to stay up to date and find out when this course is coming out, sign up for my newsletter. And of course, I'll let you guys know in future podcast episodes. I already have 2 episodes planned for January, and I'm trying to line up great content for the rest of the year. So as always, if you have any requests for topics and all that good stuff, let me know. Send me an email. And of course, as always, thank you for the support and wishing you all a wonderful holiday and a great end of 2023. As for what I'll be up to on New Year's Eve, I'm actually throwing a big New Year's Eve party for all our parent friends with their young kids because, what else are we going to be doing with young kids as adults? With our little ones around, and so I figured we may as well all hang out, and it'll be total chaos, beautiful chaos. We did this last year. It was absolutely crazy. It was also super fun. We had a blast, so I'm pretty stoked for that. All right, guys, have a wonderful rest of the year. See you all in 2024.